Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another Top Cut breakdown video. Today we'll be going over the Top Cut results for the last main event before Nationals, the Pro Support TCG Weekend Set 15 case tournament. So we'll get into it, but first, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel while also stepping your game up, make sure to check out the Patreon down in the description. Not only does it really help the channel out, guys, but you also get to read the competitive articles that I post there, as well as inquire about some coaching if you are interested in that. I've got a lot of coaching clients as we head into Nationals. I gotta say, it's been a ton of fun to both work with new people and watch players grow. It's a really awesome thing. But anyways, we will get into this. So we do have the Pro Support TCG Weekend case tournament, people playing for a case of set 15. Unfortunately, the set was delayed, so the format was a little wonky. The set 15 ban list was implemented, but obviously set 15 was not legal. So these guys are playing for a case set 15 that would be delivered to them once it came out. We did have over 40 players, which is a pretty good size for an IRL tournament, especially a non-Bandai official tournament where there's companies kind of just putting up their own prize support saying, hey, come out and play. And this was the first major big event that Pro Support hosted, and I gotta say, the event was so awesome. So they had Digimon, Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, all different TCG tournaments for pretty much every game you can think of, even MetaZoo and Fab. So they had literally everything. It's just a company that wants to, create an environment for all card game players. So on that end, the tournament was absolutely incredible. The event was awesome. There were artists, there were vendors. It was a really great time, kind of like a mini Gen Con, which Gen Con is one of my favorite things of the year. So if you guys aren't able to make the Gen Con and you see a Pro Support event coming up, definitely book your trip for that. Texas, also just an excellent place. My first time in Texas, I was very excited. The one issue, guys, though, if you guys tuned into the stream, there were a fair amount of technical difficulties, and I do want to apologize for that. Realistically, it was no one's fault at the venue. We were on and off the phone with the internet service providers 4 or 5 times. So I think it was a combination of the convention center and just a pretty crappy time with the internet, but we were able to get it cleaned up for day 2. So I hope you guys had a really enjoyable stream experience as much as you were able to. But regardless, the tournament was still very fun. I think a little bit telling about how we're going to go into Nats, because even though Nats is going to be a different format with set 15 being legal and everything, set 15 doesn't shake things up all that much. It adds new staple cards to the format, but the archetypes aren't all that incredible. One of the biggest changes, though, that I think is going to happen from this format, which again was a weird in-between format, to set 15, is Icarus gets more powerful. So Icarus obviously took huge hits on the set 15 ban list, right? So it makes sense that it's not listed here in the top 8. It's very weak right now, at least comparatively to these decks. I think Icarus is still a good deck, but in set 15 it gets a lot of new blue-yellow tools to play with, so that's going to make it even stronger. We'll see if it rebounds from the loss of Bojack and Zamasu. But anyways, let's talk about this top 8. So we have one Red Broly taking the W here. We have a blue-green Gotenks in second place. Then to round it out, we have 2 U7 Gohans, a red Jiren, a Gogeta Xeno, an Android 21, believe it or not, and a blue-red Soul Striker. So first thing to notice, there is so much red in this top 8, right? It's kind of insane. You have a few of your usual suspects like Jiren, Gogeta Xeno, and Soul Striker, but the rest of these guys like Red Broly and Gohan, pretty rogue red decks, at least considering last format. Now we can't really fairly assess what's rogue until we see some more Top Cut data from different tournaments, but we'll really only have this before we go into Nationals, so it's kind of the best we have to go off of. But yeah, so much red, and I really am not too surprised by this, because the fact that these defensive mid-range decks, basically blue and blue-yellow, took pretty solid hits, obviously more so blue-yellow, but blue also took a hit with the loss of Galactic Buster. So that just means that aggro can creep back in, and you don't have to deal with all these crazy defensive walls, right? It just makes your life just that much easier. As for what aggro decks are good, that was kind of the hard part to figure out, but this helps us figure that out a bit. And again, going into Nats, not much in set 15 really impacts these decks. Again, there's a few tech cards here and there that maybe each of these decks can play and add to their deck, but there's no red deck that really pushes out Red Broly or Jiren. There's no black deck that pushes out Gogeta Xeno. There's certainly no green deck that pushes out Gotenks. These decks are all still going to be very viable choices going into Nats. So let's talk about them a bit more piece by piece. Again, we do have Red Broly winning the event. My plan is to have the profile here on the channel tomorrow or the next day, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Red Broly, man, even though it saw a minor nerf with Planet Vampa now only being able to be used if you have no battle cards in play, the card's still really good, gets your engine going, and gets your first chain started. But regardless, the deck is just still so aggressive. Like, you're still putting out so many big bodies, and there's not nearly as much free play as there was, which is a good thing for the game overall. It definitely needs some more balance. But as far as what you can do for 1 energy, Red Broly might be one of the best decks just in regards to that. Like, for that 1 energy, you're just getting attacker after attacker after attacker while also taking your opponent's hand away, and then eventually you land on this 30k crit battle card that's really hard to be removed in the first early turns of the game. So that's swinging, your leader swinging for a big crit. And then the biggest thing about the deck, guys, when you resolve the -6 ability on the Piccolo Unison, you should win the game almost every single time you do that. The rare times you're not going to win on resolving -6 is if your opponent has a counterplay like Super Kamehameha, like Godsling Technique Trunks. If they're able to stop your -6, you might be in a bit of trouble, but it's honestly pretty tough to set up that counterplay or set up that response so early in the game, because you can resolve Piccolo as early as turn 2, usually turn 3, but especially if you go first, your opponent's only going to be on 2 energy, and if they're in blue, they're probably not going to have Unison in play. It's just a really bad time for your opponent, especially if they lose a dice roll. I usually don't think that dice roll is too important in Dragon Ball Super, especially when it's mid-range versus mid-range or control versus control, but aggro definitely benefits a lot from winning the die roll, and Red Broly is a good example of that. I wouldn't really say there are too many turn 2 kills. We saw a few of them attempted on stream, but they weren't super successful, but you can still cripple your opponent pretty heavily on turn 2, setting up for a nice turn 3 victory. And I think Red Broly just has like the cleanest turn 3 in the game, again with that Piccolo -6. So very powerful deck. I would definitely advise you prepare for it going into Nets. Then we have Blue Green Gotenks coming in 2nd place. So this was piloted by Carlos, whose profile I do have on the channel already from a few months ago. I believe it was a online event that he topped with it, and it's a very similar build. He said he only changed like 2 or 3 cards here or there, so the core concept is the same. Basically, he wants to charge blue green on turn 1, turn 2, play Unison. Now you have a blue open energy that can lead you into Sensu Bean, into a Grim Reaper play, or on any subsequent turn you play Grim Reaper. Now you can bean it. It's 30k attacking twice, and you have access to more plays. I do think blue green is a really cool concept in Gotenks. I do think it's a little tough to fit though, just because like the deck is so kind of build it yourself style, where there's just so many engine cards that are kind of required to play in the deck. But Carlos makes it work, man. He makes it work really well. He utilizes the beans very well. Again, if you guys were able to see it on stream, day 1 was a bit choppy, but he was also on stream day 2 showcasing what the deck can do. It's a very cool concept. As far as green decks go, Cell Surge is probably top dog, and I'm a bit surprised we didn't see that Cell Surge in this top 8. But still, I mean, as far as green decks go, Gotenks a solid rogue contender, even going into last format where Icarus and Soul Striker were at full power. So good deck for sure. 2 red U7 Gohan. This has got to be the most surprising part about the weekend. This deck, again, red and like aggro-ish decks definitely got a boost from mid-range defensive decks taking a hit. But I still feel like there are better red aggro decks than U7 Gohan. I feel like Jiren is probably the best red aggro deck, possibly followed by Broly, or you could even possibly switch those 2 around. I could definitely see the argument for that. But still, I mean, U7 Gohan, I guess the main strength of it is that you can play it as a bit more of a mid-rangey style. So if you're up against one of these aggro decks, like a red aggro mirror, for example, you have the ability to pivot into a bit more of a defensive deck. So I think that's the main thing that U7 Gohan has going for it, pretty much that flexibility. But obviously the deck just kind of works off the back of Goku Divine Presence. That card is absolutely bonkers. Such an incredible card. And again, just with less defense your opponent has access to, it hits all that much harder. Like the deflect, the fact that it can't be removed during your turn, it's kind of hard to interact with that guy when he comes down. So he's swinging twice for probably 2 30k big swings and replenishing your hand. That card's really good. U7 Gohan, again, I think it's good. I do think red aggro decks exist that outclass this, but maybe the main advantage is that it can kind of pivot to a bit more of a mid-rangey build. Then we have Red Jiren. Again, I think it's one of the top red aggro decks because your leader lets you free play battle cards that help you set up a really wide board. Nothing too crazy to see here. It's pretty much the same Jiren we've been playing with, although I think, again, red aggro just gets stronger because defensive mid-range is weaker. So I would expect to see more Jiren popping up more red aggro in general. Jiren also is pretty easy to build. Like, I think I've been seeing a lot of builds that don't even play the tournament pack promo, or at least like 2, maybe 3 copies, and the card's really not all that expensive anyway, so it's kind of nice that the deck has a good TP that isn't crazy expensive. So the deck should be relatively affordable to build for you guys, which is kind of nice. Definitely a deck I expect to continue to see. When they drop that Zenith of Power, man, it's pretty scary. Like, that's always been the odd things about Jiren archetypes, is they've had really good Jiren boss monsters, but they've always been very, very expensive, and you've never really been super incentivized to play them. But now Zenith of Power coming down on turn 3 for only 2 energy, like, that's a card you want to pay 2 energy for. That card is very, very powerful. Kind of the same case for Goku Divine Presence in other red decks. This deck in particular, though, rides off the back of Zenith of Power. That card's very, very strong. And then Gogeta Xeno, really nothing special here. This is a usual suspect. Still a very, very good deck coming off of last format. One I definitely would expect to see going into Nationals. I think many players speculate this to be one of, if not the most popular decks at Nationals, which is kind of ironic because of how expensive S3 Gogeta Thwarting the Dark Empire is, but still incredible card for Nationals. Price is probably not going to be a factor. The most competitive players that want to win, want to do well, they're going to spend the money on the cards that give them the best shot of doing that, right? So Gogeta Xeno, definitely prep for it. You got to be able to deal with those 1-drops, I think. If you have some ways to clear them off the board without triggering either of their effects, that is very, very ideal. Besides that, though, you got to be able to take a lot of attacks from big Gogetas. If you're yellow, rest moning them when they enter play is great. If you're blue, Godsling can put in work. Other colors, though, I gotta say it's tough to interact with these things. Like red, your best bet is probably Violent Rays. Imposing Presence is also not bad, but every counter you use, you got to definitely take into account how many Goku True Fighting Spirits they have in play and kind of play following suit. I personally think that Gogeta Xeno is better aggro than most red aggro decks. Like, from my testing experience as well as seeing what went on this weekend, it seems like Gogeta Xeno is usually favored against red aggro, but I think it's a bit close, especially depending on how Gogeta Xeno lands with RNG. It is a very, very RNG deck. Like, your first activation of the Warp 5 could be perfect fusion material, or it could be 3 Gogetas and 2 useless cards. Like, that is one of the problems with this deck. It is pretty RNG, both for you and your opponent. So something you definitely got to deal with if you're playing this deck. And then we had an Android 21. Shout out to Rohit, who's been on the channel quite a few times now. I also have his profile from a few months ago here on the channel, so if you want to check that out, feel free. The build he played this weekend is not too different from the one that is on the channel, but one of the most like ace cards he played this weekend was Piccolo Assimilated Ability. Very, very cool card. Like, the thing with these types of ramp decks, whenever you can play a strong 4 cost on turn 3, that is one of the main appeals of playing this deck. So he's playing both Buu Unison and Piccolo Assimilated Ability, and the fact that he can drop both those cards on turn 3 gives this deck a really interesting, you know, kind of pull as to why you should play it. Very, very cool deck. I've always loved Android 21, so really cool to see a top 8 here. And then we have a blue-red Soul Striker. So Soul Striker is not super unexpected to see, but blue-red is definitely very interesting. This was just playing your typical Arrival stuff, like Arrival Cooler, Arrival Hercule Buu. This is a very cool concept. I think when you're playing Soul Striker, you have the option of mono blue, blue yellow. Those are the 2 more obvious ones. And then blue-red gives you, I guess, a little bit more like battle interruption, and that could change going into set 15 because we're getting S2 Kefla and Vegeta Kaba. So now blue-yellow will have access to that battle interruption. Blue kind of lost its battle interruption because Galactic Buster is now errated. So maybe if you want like the more interactive Soul Striker, you want to be looking at blue-yellow or blue-red. That seems to be the case. As we're mono-blue, maybe you're just playing like defensive stall with tons of negates going into Android 17, turning the tide. But blue-yellow, blue-red probably have the ability to end the game a bit earlier, play some different boss monsters, play some different tech. So I think you got to kind of look at it, see what tech cards in the different colors, mainly yellow and red, that will offer you a good amount of mileage, and kind of pick your build from there. But anyways, guys, that is going to wrap up today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys are having a good time getting ready for Nats. I'll see you there, and see you in the next video.